I heard the words, "You can stop looking now," before I even touched the deck, and I don't know why that feels so specific. Not in a predictive way, more like the part of you that's always scanning the horizon, always asking what's next, is getting tired. And then this is the first card, the Three of Wands. Okay, that makes sense immediately. Look at the figure here, telescope in hand, lanterns above them. They're not lost. They're searching from a position of awareness. And that's important because this connection starts with attraction. Yes, but I don't think attraction is actually the thing making you feel so pulled in. It's recognition. Wait, let me say that differently. You're used to being the person who notices everything first, the shift in someone's tone, the hesitation, the hidden motive, the tiny change in energy when somebody walks into a room. You're observant, and because of that, people can be very easy for you to read. But this person? They keep making you look again, and I think they feel exactly the same way about you. There's a strange power dynamic forming already. Not power as in controlling somebody against their will. I mean psychological gravity. Your attention matters to them. If you pull back, they notice. If you go quiet, they wonder why. If you look at them a certain way. Okay, yeah, they absolutely feel that. But here's what's interesting. The Three of Wands is not a card of somebody collapsing into obsession. Symbolically, this is someone with their own direction, their own plans, their own horizon. So whoever this represents, they're not weak. They have a life, ambition, standards, possibly leadership energy. They may be the person everyone else expects to know what they're doing. And yet around you, they become curious. That's the first crack in the armor. I keep focusing on the telescope because it feels like they're studying you from a distance before they fully move closer. Not literally stalking. Please don't turn it into that. More like observing. Remembering details. Trying to understand why your presence stays with them after you're gone. And I'm getting one more thing from this card. But I don't want to rush it because it changes the whole tone of the reading. This isn't someone wondering whether they're attracted to you. They're trying to figure out what this attraction is leading them toward, and then strength comes out reversed. Okay, that's interesting, because now I understand why they're looking so far ahead. This person isn't only asking, "Do I want you?" I think that part is already relatively clear to them. They're asking what happens to the version of their life they had already decided on if they let themselves want you seriously. Because strength reversed, symbolically, is not necessarily weakness. Sometimes it's what happens when the usual method of keeping yourself composed stops working quite as well. And this person is composed. Or they're used to being composed. There's a difference. They know how to make decisions. They know how to prioritize. They probably have things they assumed would happen in a certain order. Work first. This goal first. Handle this responsibility. Get through that season of life. Whatever it is, there's a structure here. And then you show up, and suddenly they're editing the structure. Not destroying it. Editing it. That feels important. I'm almost seeing something very small, like they change when they're going to be somewhere, because there's a chance you'll be there. Or they leave a little more room in their schedule than they normally would. They may not even consciously connect that decision to you yet. But they're making space. And that is actually much more revealing than somebody sending you 20 messages telling you how attracted they are. Because remember, this is not someone without direction, so when a person like that quietly begins accounting for you in decisions you were never technically part of, yeah, that says something. Wait, there's another layer to strength reversed. They cannot make you simple. And I think that bothers them a little. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because they're probably very good at understanding what category somebody belongs in. Friend, attraction, temporary, serious, compatible. Not compatible, you keep slipping out of the category. Every time they think, okay, this is just chemistry, Something happens that makes them imagine a conversation 6 months from now. Every time they try to keep it physical, there's something about your mind. Every time they try to make it intellectual, their body reminds them that, no, this is definitely not just intellectual either. And you don't have to do anything to create that effect. That's the power dynamic I was talking about. It isn't you controlling them. It's that your presence has become information they can't ignore. Your attention means something because you don't hand it over carelessly. Your interest means something because they can feel that you're still observing, still deciding, still completely capable of having your own horizon. And I think that's why the telescope is here. They started by looking at you. Now they're looking at the future with you somewhere inside it. But strength reversed is making me notice something else. Because before their mind can decide what to do with that possibility, their body is already answering. And that reaction? I don't think they're hiding it nearly as well as they think they are, because now justice comes out. Okay, that is almost funny. Not because justice is a particularly passionate card on the surface. It isn't. If anything, this is composure, measurement. Trying to keep your reactions proportionate to what is actually happening. And I think that's exactly the problem. They're trying to be reasonable about you. Their body is not cooperating. Look at how controlled this figure is. Everything is contained, nothing excessive. There's this sense of, I know how to conduct myself. So externally, they may look completely fine. But watch the smaller reactions. Their posture changes when you come near them. They become more aware of where you are in the room. If you stand a little closer than usual, there's that half second where suddenly they're conscious of the distance between your body and theirs. Not uncomfortable. Conscious. That's different. I also keep getting something about your voice. Like they remember the way you said something more than the actual thing you said. Your tone. A certain laugh. Maybe the way your voice changes when you're being serious versus when you're teasing them. And they probably wouldn't admit how much they notice that, because justice wants evidence. It wants a logical explanation. So they're sitting there internally going, okay, this person is attractive. Fine. That explains it. Except it doesn't, because attractive people exist everywhere. They don't all make this person lose their train of thought for half a second. They don't all make them suddenly notice their own hands, their own posture, whether they're standing too close, whether they've been looking too long. Wait, that's what this is. They're not only physically aware of you, you make them physically aware of themselves. And that is much harder to hide. They might straighten up when you enter, stay 5 minutes longer than they needed to, find one more thing to say before leaving. Or they'll be perfectly composed while you're there, and then notice the room feels strangely flat after you're gone. That's not ownership. It's not you controlling somebody's body. It's responsiveness. Their nervous system is registering your presence before their carefully organized mind has finished deciding what it means. And honestly, that may be why justice is here. They're trying to keep this balanced because they can feel how easily the attraction could become bigger than attraction. There's respect underneath it. Recognition underneath that. The physical pull is almost like the doorway. And they know if they walk through that doorway, they're probably not walking into something casual. But here's where this gets more complicated. Because their body reacting when you're physically present, they can explain that. What they're going to have a much harder time explaining is why you're starting to affect them when you're not even there. And then the tower comes out. Yeah, okay. Now I understand why this is happening in their head too. Because the tower symbolically is what happens when something gets through a structure that was supposed to hold. And this person has structures, mental ones. They know how to explain people to themselves. They know how to decide what somebody means, what role they play, how much attention they deserve. usually pretty quickly. But you keep interrupting the conclusion. They'll replay something you said that probably felt completely ordinary to you. A sentence, a question, maybe even a pause where you didn't say anything at all. And that pause might bother them more than an explanation would, because you don't always fill in the blank for them, so they have to. They start wondering, what did they mean by that? Then, did they notice that? Then somehow they're halfway through imagining what they would say if the conversation came up again. And nothing has even happened yet. Now, I want to be careful here. This isn't me saying somebody is sitting around consumed by you 24 hours a day. That's not what I mean. It's more subtle than that. You create mental resistance. They can't process you once and put you away. And look at the tower here. Something is hitting the highest part of the structure. That feels specific, because I think at first they thought they were studying you. Remember the telescope? They were watching, assessing, trying to understand you, but somewhere along the way they realized you were seeing them too. And that changed everything, because being admired is one thing, being understood is another. Wait, actually, that's the uncomfortable part. They may be used to knowing how people perceive them. Competent, attractive, successful, controlled, whatever image they naturally project. But with you, they're wondering what you see underneath that. That question keeps following them. Not, why am I attracted to this person anymore? More like, what do they know about me? And then eventually, would they still want me if they knew all of it? That's where the tower becomes much more emotional than intellectual, because your restraint matters here. If you constantly reassured them, explained every feeling, told them exactly where they stood, they could relax into certainty. But you don't seem to give them more information than you genuinely mean, so their mind stays engaged. They notice your silence. They remember your questions. They think about the moments where you looked at them like you understood something they hadn't actually said. And I think that's what scares them. Not that they can't control their thoughts. They can. It's that somewhere underneath all of those thoughts, you may have already reached a part of them nobody else was supposed to see. And then the Eight of Swords comes out. Okay, at first I thought this was going to be about fear, and it is. But not in the way I expected. Look at the figure here, blindfolded, surrounded by swords. There's this feeling of being contained. But what keeps catching my attention is that the containment isn't the whole story. Because this person is not powerless. They've just gotten very good at living inside certain emotional rules. Don't need too much, don't reveal too much. Stay capable, stay composed. Figure it out yourself. And if I read this symbolically, I think that's the part of them you've reached. Not some secret weakness, a private exhaustion. There's a difference. This may be somebody who is very accustomed to being the person other people lean on. The one with the answer, the one who handles things. The one who can keep functioning even when something underneath them is complicated. So people see the strength. They don't always ask what the strength costs. Wait, that's why this feels so intimate. I don't think you're making them feel less powerful. You're making them wonder whether they have to be powerful every second around you. That is completely different. There may have already been a moment where they told you something and then surprised themselves afterward. Nothing dramatic necessarily. Maybe one personal detail they usually keep vague. Maybe they admitted they were worried about something. Maybe a conversation went slightly deeper than they intended, and instead of ending it when they normally would, they stayed. And afterward they thought about that too, because you didn't use it against them. You didn't immediately demand more. You just understood. That kind of response can be incredibly disarming for someone who has learned to associate vulnerability with losing control. And this is where the connection starts feeling bigger than physical attraction to me. Not because I'm saying there's some guaranteed spiritual bond here, but there is recognition. Almost an energetic mirroring where each person is quietly asking the other, can I be more myself here? Not, can you complete me? That's not what this feels like. More like, can I stop cutting pieces of myself off just to remain understandable? That's powerful couple energy in a much less glamorous sense. Two complete people calling more honesty out of each other. And I think you may notice this person getting softer with you in ways that are easy to miss. Their tone changes. They become careful with something you've told them. They remember what matters to you. They might even protect your feelings in a moment where nobody else would have noticed there was anything to protect. But the Eight of Swords is still here, and that means this recognition creates a problem. Because when you've spent years protecting the exact place somebody suddenly makes feel safe, you don't only want to move closer. Part of you wants to run. And then the Seven of Wands comes out reversed. Okay, that makes sense, because upright, this is somebody holding their position. Defending it, protecting what they've decided is theirs to protect. Reversed? Sometimes the question becomes whether maintaining that defense is actually worth the energy anymore. And I think that's the push-pull here. They move toward you, and then they remember how much moving toward you could change. So they slow down. They tell you something real, and then afterward they become a little more measured. They have a moment with you where they're completely present. Eye contact, attention, everything. And then later, they need space to process why that moment affected them as much as it did. That doesn't automatically mean somebody is secretly in love with you, by the way. Distance is still distance. Hesitation is still hesitation. I don't want you turning every quiet moment into evidence. But symbolically, these cards are describing somebody whose first response to intensity may be to regulate it. Not because they feel nothing. Because they understand that feelings have consequences. And shallow attraction is actually easy. You can enjoy it without rearranging anything. You flirt, you have chemistry, you move on. But meaningful attraction starts asking inconvenient questions. What am I willing to change? What am I ready to risk? Can I actually meet this person at the level they're asking for without them ever having to ask? And that last part feels important, because I don't think you're chasing them through this. At least you're not supposed to. Wait, look at this card again. The defense is dropping, but I don't think you're the one pulling it down. They are. That changes the whole thing. Your leverage here is not convincing them. It's not proving you're desirable enough. It's not becoming easier to access so they feel safer choosing you. It's almost the opposite. You remain consistent. Warm, maybe. Interested, yes. But you don't abandon your standards just because the chemistry is intense. And that forces this person to deal with something they may not be used to. They cannot secure your attention with charm alone. They cannot keep you indefinitely in ambiguity and assume you'll stay emotionally available. They have to show up. And if they are as self-directed as these cards suggest, I think they respect that even while it challenges them. Because underneath all of this, both of you may be asking the same question. Can you handle me without trying to overpower me? Can we want each other and still remain equals? That's where the tension is. And strangely, the thing making their defenses come down faster may be something you're barely doing at all. You're not trying to get past them. You're giving them the space to come toward you themselves. And then the Six of Cups comes out reversed. Okay. Yeah, this is actually really interesting after the Seven of Wands reversed. Because both cards are talking about what happens when you stop repeating an old pattern. And I think that's your influence here. You're not forcing anything forward. You're just not participating in the version of connection where one person does all the reaching and the other person gets to stay undecided forever. That sounds simple. It isn't. Especially for somebody who may be used to being pursued. or admired. Or having people become very obvious very quickly about what they want from them. You're different because you can want them without handing them control of the entire situation. Wait, that's the distinction. You have desire, but you still have choice, and they can feel that. The Six of Cups reversed can point symbolically to leaving familiar emotional habits behind. So maybe this person has experienced dynamics where chemistry automatically meant somebody over-giving, over-explaining, trying to impress them, trying to secure a position. You're not doing that. You're warm when you want to be warm. You respond when something deserves a response. You notice them, absolutely. But your entire emotional center doesn't move just because they walked into the room. And for someone who is used to having impact, that creates impact. It makes them pay attention differently. Because now attraction has respect inside it. And this is where I want to redefine this whole idea of being in control. You're not in control of their body. You're in control of yours. You're not controlling their thoughts. You're deciding what gets access to your attention. You're not controlling their emotional world. You're managing your own. That is a completely different kind of power. And somehow, that's exactly what makes this connection touch the body, the mind, and whatever deeper emotional layer we've been talking about. Neither person disappears. Actually, the stronger the attraction becomes, the more both of you are being asked to remain yourselves. Okay, wait. The Seven of Wands reversed was defenses dropping. Now the Six of Cups reversed is an old relational pattern becoming less convincing. Those two together, that feels significant. Because this person may not become more careless as they feel more. They may become more intentional. They know that if they treat this casually, they could actually lose access to you. Not as punishment. Just because you're not going to stay inside something that doesn't meet you properly. So I think they're approaching a decision. And the next card? I don't think it's going to tell us whether they're attracted. We already know that. I think it's going to show what happens when two people stop testing the connection and actually choose it. And then the King of Cups comes out. Okay. Yeah, now I see what choosing it actually means here. Because the King of Cups is not somebody being overwhelmed by emotion. This is somebody who can feel deeply and still remain themselves. And that matters, especially after everything we've already seen about this person trying to stay composed, trying to understand you, trying to decide whether getting closer means losing some kind of control. It doesn't. At least, it doesn't have to. Look at this figure. There's confidence here, but it isn't loud. They're holding the cup. They're not spilling it everywhere. They know what they feel. They just know how to carry it. And honestly, that feels much more like the partnership potential in this reading than some dramatic idea of two people being destined for each other. This would work because neither person has to become smaller. You have your horizon. They have theirs. Remember the Three of Wands? That person was looking outward, thinking about where life was going. And now I think the question is becoming, could we actually build in the same direction? Not abandon everything for each other. Build. There's a difference. Maybe you challenge the way they think. Maybe they help you turn something you've been imagining into an actual decision. Maybe one of you sees possibilities other people completely miss, while the other person knows how to take that insight and move. Wait. That might be why this connection feels so activating. You may not be mirrors in the obvious sense. You might be complementary. One of you catches what's beneath the surface. The other knows what to do once it's been recognized. And together, that can become powerful very quickly, not just romantically. Practically, ideas, ambition, encouragement, calling each other out when necessary. Protecting the softer parts of the relationship without needing to perform them for everybody else. There's something very private about the tenderness here. But publicly, I think people could notice the respect. The way you listen to each other, The way neither of you seems diminished by the other person's strength. That's what makes the chemistry feel different. Respect is underneath it. And desire sitting on top of respect tends to become much harder to dismiss. But the King of Cups also creates a problem. Because eventually, emotional maturity requires expression. You cannot stay in observation forever. You cannot keep feeling something significant and endlessly hide behind composure. At some point, somebody has to cross the distance the Three of Wands introduced at the very beginning. And I think that's the threshold we're approaching now. A conversation, an admission, a choice. Something small enough to look ordinary from the outside, but clear enough that afterward, neither of you can pretend this is still just unspoken chemistry. Because once somebody actually says what this is becoming, you can't go back to merely watching each other from across the horizon, and then the Nine of Cups comes out. Okay, that changes the feeling immediately. Because this is desire becoming acknowledged, not necessarily announced yet, but acknowledged. Look at this figure. Everything is already laid out in front of them. The cups are there. There's no searching happening in this card. And that matters after the Three of Wands. Because we started with somebody looking into the distance, trying to understand what they were moving toward. Now, the question is almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. What if what they want is already in front of them? That doesn't mean I'm telling you they're about to make some huge declaration. This could show up in much quieter ways. A deliberate invitation. A conversation they stop pretending is casual. Them finally saying, "I've been thinking about this." Maybe they tell you something that makes the subtext impossible to ignore. Maybe they simply become consistent enough that you no longer have to guess what they're doing. But something changes once desire becomes a choice. Because then they lose plausible deniability. They can't stand behind the telescope anymore. They have to step into the landscape they've been studying. And I think that's difficult for them because observation has been safe. Wanting you privately is safe. Thinking about you is safe. Feeling their body respond to you, replaying conversations, wondering what you see underneath all that composure. Technically, they can contain all of that. But action? Action creates an answer. And here's the part I don't want you to miss. You have to answer too. You're not standing at the end of this reading, waiting to be selected. If this person becomes clear, you still get to decide whether what they're offering actually matches what you want. That is the real tension. Because the passion is not the test anymore. The passion is obvious. Their body has been responding. Their mind has been occupied. And emotionally, something in them has already started opening. The test is whether two people can be deeply affected by each other without turning that vulnerability into a competition. No games. No punishment through silence. No trying to make the other person prove how much they care. No confusing control with security. Wait, that might actually be the whole power couple message. Can both of you remain powerful while admitting that the other person matters? Because that requires more courage than attraction does. And the Nine of Cups is making me think somebody is getting very close to admitting what they want. But strangely, I don't think the final message is about whether they choose you. I think it's about why. From the very beginning, you may have been the one holding the key, and then the Eight of Pentacles comes out. Okay, that's the key. Not possession, participation. Look at this figure. They're working on something piece by piece. Attention on the details. No spectacle. No dramatic declaration. Just effort. And suddenly, that first message, "You can stop looking now," feels completely different to me. Because I don't think it means, "Congratulations, you found your guaranteed person." That would be too easy. I think it means you can stop constantly scanning for proof. Stop looking for the next sign. The next reaction. The next little piece of evidence that tells you whether somebody wants you enough. Because if something real is being built, Eventually, you won't have to study it from a distance. You'll be able to see the work. That feels important. The Eight of Pentacles is very practical after all these emotionally intense cards. We've had the body reacting, the mind replaying, that deeper recognition, the defenses, the desire. But none of those things by themselves create a relationship. Effort does. Consistency does. Two people actually showing up does. Wait, maybe that's why your influence has been so strong here. You're reflecting the exact challenge back to this person that they're creating for you. They have to stop observing you from safety. But so do you. Not by chasing them. That's not what I mean. By allowing yourself to experience what is actually happening instead of constantly standing outside of it, analyzing whether it's going to become something. That telescope from the Three of Wands keeps coming back. At some point, you lower it. You look at what is directly in front of you, and then you decide. Not based on fantasy, not based on chemistry alone, based on what is being built. Because real power couple energy isn't one person controlling the other person's body, mind, and soul. It's two people who still possess themselves completely and choose to invest anyway. You can desire somebody without losing your judgment. You can be deeply affected without losing your center. You can let somebody matter without doing their half of the work. And they have to be capable of the same thing. That's the reciprocity. That's the part that makes this feel mature instead of intoxicating for 5 minutes and confusing for 5 months. So maybe you can stop looking now. Was never really about finding them. Maybe it was about no longer needing to search outside yourself for certainty before you allow yourself to live. If this person wants to come closer, there's room for that. If they want to build, they can build with you. But they have to put their hands on the work too. And I think that's the final image here. The telescope comes down. The lanterns are still lit. The horizon is still there, but neither of you is watching love from a distance anymore.